world is full of ups and downs. Life itself is hard. I started the segment How I Really Feel so I can get a chance to speak about my feelings. Hi beautiful people, my name is Melanie Koto aka Mrs. M. Welcome to another episode of How I Really Feel. Today we're joined by Sophia V from Second Chances with Sophia. So we want to know whether or not dating issues can have an impact on a human being as they grow up. So please introduce yourself.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. My name is Sophia V, and I'm 29 years old. So, yes, how do I introduce myself? What do you want to know about me?
What do you do? You have a channel, so tell us a little bit about your channel.
Okay, I have a YouTube channel that is called Second Chances with Sophia V. And the whole aim or the whole content that is covered around my YouTube channel is that I lost my father due to suicide when I was 12 years old, and I also had a suicide attempt of my own later on in life. So I raise awareness on depression and I encourage the spirit of healing.
Can you share a little bit your story about how you lost your father and how that had an impact on you emotionally and psychologically?
Yeah, so I'm the middle child of three. I have three. Basically, we have siblings. We are called Triple V, Vusi, Vutomi, and Vutibi, and I'm the middle child. So I grew up in a normal household with loving parents, and I would consider myself a daddy's little girl. So when I was 12 years old, I was in grade 8. I was in a boarding school. So on one fateful day, usually the setup at the boarding school was that you would normally go home once a month at the last weekend of the month. So I was surprised at one Friday at the boarding school when I had gone out to the mall with my friends, and then I bumped into some of my hostel mates, and they told me that they bumped into my dad and was looking for me. And I was not expecting my dad to be looking for me at the hostel on that particular day because I did not have to go home and he had not sent out any communication regarding coming to see me. So while we're at the mall, because I lied at the hostel saying we're going to the one mall, but we found ourselves at another mall. Like it seemed like a back and forth type of a situation whereby I kept on missing my dad. And eventually at some point I went back to the hostel and I did not see my dad. But as soon as we got there, it was back in the days when there were, we used those big telephones by the wall. And I tried to call my dad. I called his phone. I remember very well his phone was ringing, but there was no answer. So for the rest of the day, for the rest of the night, I did not hear from my dad. And that was on too much. The following day, while I was at school, my uncle came to collect me. Once again, for me, it was out of the norm. It was not a normal situation for my uncle or any relative to come and visit me out of the blue. So when he came to fetch me that day, we drove around and eventually we went to the hospital. When we got to the hospital, I found my mom lying in the hospital bed, and as soon as she saw me, she broke down. So I basically also started crying because I did not understand. And I remember her, she gave me a hug and she held me close and she told me that my father had passed away. Hours later from that moment, that is when I learned that when my father left the hostel, he actually went back home and actually committed suicide. As a child at that point in time, it used to haunt me, and I didn't communicate with anyone because I often wondered, was my dad there to say goodbye to me, or was it there to take me with him?
Yeah.
As I said, I consider myself a daddy's little girl, so I always wondered, was he going to take his own life and also kill me, or was he going to kill me and take his own life in the process, or what had he found me?
Yeah.
That question, I've always had that question. What had he found me? What was going to happen?
Yeah, I heard a story from St. Prince, and for a 12-year-old to be going through that, that's deep. And how was your well-being after that whole experience, knowing that your dad committed suicide and he was looking for you? I mean, hours before, like, how was your well-being? And if you were not okay, what did you do for you to bring back your normal self to sense and move forward?
The memories that I have leading up to my father's funeral, for me personally, the one thing that did affect me, I feel like during that week whereby my father died and we're preparing for this funeral, I was not allowed to mourn him. Everyone was expected to be strong, and there was just a lot of things happening at home almost immediately. Our house was filled with so many people, there was a lot of love, and I felt safe. But then immediately after the funeral, and as everyone went back to their normal lives, and then now it was the 4 of us in the house and it was no longer 5. Now you are feeling the emptiness. You can tell that this person has left. That is when I felt like, that is when it finally hit me, after he died. And unfortunately for me, as I said, I was in boarding school. So it meant that after the funeral, I only had a few days to spend with my family, and I was back into the arms of strangers, if I can call them that, because now I was surrounded by the students, and those students, they were young, they were my same age, we were different ages. So as soon as I went back to boarding school, I feel like I was just a walking zombie. I was not myself anymore, but I could not pinpoint what is wrong with me. But I knew I felt a certain void in me. All I wanted to do was I found myself always wanting to sleep, because when I'm sleeping, I always used to dream about my dad. He used to love taking me to the park, and every time I would dream about him, we would always be at a park, we would always be happy, we would always be laughing. And the last memories that I have of my dad is him being a happy man, and those are the memories that I cherish. I felt that in my dreams I could always see him, and that made me happy. But then with it meant that I was shutting the world out. And I'm sure there were more things that were happening around me that I did not notice, because I think a month or 2 after my father died, now all I knew is that every Tuesday and a Thursday I have an appointment with a special lady. So I used to see this lady, and I felt like she's my friend, and every time I was with her, after she left, I used to feel so much better. And later on in life, I learned that actually I was seeing a psychologist. So I do not know who in my life saw what and saw it fitting for me to go through counseling, but I feel like that is how I got my healing, or that is how I actually dealt with it, because that psychologist was communicating with me in a language that I understood, which was love, which was calmness, and it was age appropriate. I feel like seeing that psychologist changed my life, and I was definitely depressed, but I didn't know it. And how long did it take for me to feel better? By the end of the year, I just woke up someday and I'm like, oh wow, that was a proper sleep. I didn't cry myself to sleep. I didn't feel empty. It felt like one day I just woke up and I had snapped out of it. I didn't know at what point can I say that I was okay. I think also the fact that I didn't even know that I had a problem to begin with. I couldn't calculate per se to say this is how long it took me to finally feel better. But I do know that I did get to a certain point and I was like, my life has changed and it's okay. How do I go forward?
So the way in which your dad passed on, did it have an impact on how you were mourning his death? Like, were you angry at him? Were you disappointed? Or were you feeling sorry or wishing that you should have been there for him to tell him that everything would be okay? Or how were you feeling? Because that was not, like, I won't say a normal passing.
Well, I think it definitely did have an impact on how I was mourning him. You know, it's one thing when someone that you love is sick and you can see them go through that process, that eventually, you know, you sort of start preparing yourself for them to depart. In my case, there was no preparation. The one moment he was there and the next is gone. There was no letter. He didn't leave behind a letter saying why he was taking his own life. And now amongst the adults in my life, I can see people are pulling each other in both directions. People are looking for answers. And almost immediately I felt like I have to silence myself. I cannot share my emotions with anyone except that friend that I had, which is a psychologist. I cannot voice out that I'm actually sad because I can see how my mother is breaking down. Unfortunately, my mother is the one that found him hanging in that state that he was in, and as you can imagine, my mom was not in the best of situations. I felt like I needed to be my mother's keeper. I felt like I needed to be my mother's protector. But how do I protect her from her from whatever memories or visions that she has of her lover, you know, of someone she loved, someone she cared about, someone she saw forever with, but unfortunately their forever was cut short. So it did affect how we're mourning, but then it also brought us closer together as family. You know, when it comes to suicide and asking questions, you know, with suicide there's always pointing of fingers. And that's not a nice feeling.
It was a fault. And you don't know what it was actually.
We don't know. And even up to today, we can only speculate. You know, when you find out that he had a fight with this one person this other day, you sort of like turn the shift to like, maybe your fight pushed him to the edge. Maybe this, maybe that. For me, I just felt that maybe had he found me, just maybe, I'm not sure, but just maybe I would have been able to pick up that he was not himself. Maybe I would have been able to pick up that something was wrong. Maybe since I was the apple of his eyes, how I viewed it, maybe him seeing me would have changed his mind, would have changed everything. Could I have saved him? I don't know. I don't know.
So, having lived your life from the age of 12 up to now, without a father, how was that experience for you? And how did that affect your other relationships with other people, be it romantic relationship, friendship, or just with family members? How do you perceive relationships? Do you have peace with people, or do you feel like they will leave you just like your dad left you?
In terms of relationships that I have with people in my life, I feel like the 12 years that my father was in my life, I experienced his love to the fullest. Right up until the last moment where I still feel like I was the last person he wanted to see. So how I view other relationships with people is that it made me stronger in terms of I know my worth. I know what love is. And I know what measure that... For me, that is the minimum. That is the bare minimum that I can accept. You need to give me what my daddy gave me and so much more, or take it back. I don't compromise when it comes to relationships because I've experienced love. I've definitely experienced love in my life, and that is something that I hold so dear with me up until today. One thing that I feel like took sort of a shift, if I can call it that, in terms of how I view or how I respect elders, is that my dad was a pastor. So as a pastor's child, you know, as you grow up, people have certain expectations of you, the way you dress, the way they expect you to turn out in life. And now my dad was not there. He was no longer there to be as our voice to protect us. Now I would find elders at church or people at church saying that, but your father would have wanted you to do this, but your father would have wanted you to do that. That is a form of bullying in my view. Because had my father been here, how do you know that he wouldn't have changed his mind about whatever view or whatever situation that is happening right now? When my father died, there was no Facebook. Now you're telling me that my father would have expected me to believe this way. Your mind has changed. Life has changed how we know it from the time that my father was here. Now, why are you still holding me a victim? How do you expect my life to pause from a point that he was in? So it taught me to stick with my small unity, which is Triple V and my mom.
Yeah.
For me, if the advice is not coming from them, I'm not taking it.
Yeah.
I refuse for anyone to take me back to what could have been, what your father would have wanted. He's not here. Who gave you the right to be his voice?
Yeah.
So I feel like I had to mature early and know how to protect myself and know how to prioritize and just have a whole different perspective in terms of family.
Yeah. So I hear you saying that the little love that your dad gave you when you were still alive, that for that 12 years, kept you till this far. What can you say to somebody who had never experienced that from when they were born? Like myself, speaking from experience, I never had an experience of having to feel his love, like from day one up till now. So what can you say to somebody who is in that situation?
I honestly and truly cannot speak from a point of emptiness. I can only speak from a point of fullness that I've experienced.
Yeah.
And if I was to give you an idea of what a love of a father is and what it feels like, it's protection.
Yeah.
Number one, I felt safe, and that safety that I can never get from anyone else. No matter how much anyone else can tell me how much my father loved me, or how much anyone else can tell me they love me, the action itself proved more than anything. Just a point of correction, I'm not saying he gave me a little love. I'm saying he gave me a big enough love in the little space that he was in my life.
Yes.
In my childhood, most of my memories, he is there.
Yeah.
In order for you to be a part of my memories, you must have been physically there in the past. And he was exactly that.
Yeah.
The majority of my happy moments, he was there. When I was falling down and I needed someone to pick me up, he was there. He was a strict dad, and especially when it comes to academics, he was an overachiever.
Yeah.
I remember him pushing us the extra mile. So much so that I'm naturally an intellect. I believe I'm a smart person. But even after his departure, I could never reach the level of achievement that I did when he was there.
Yeah.
So I cannot say this is how you should feel, or this is how a father is supposed to be. I can only tell you specifically about my own father, Gabriel Mashila Chavalan. That is how he took on his role as a father. That is how he viewed fatherhood, involvement, putting family first, cooking for us. He was a neat freak. The sad part is that when a person dies, you start forgetting certain things about them. I used to feel bad about forgetting the sound of his voice. But I used to forget how wide he used to stretch his mouth when he smiled. It's the smallest thing that I used to feel guilty about. But then I decided to change my mind, and through the help of psychology, I started holding on when I walk into a room and I smell foam bath. It reminds me of him.
Yeah.
When I meet a man who has like clean nails, because that is how neat my dad was, it reminds me of him. When someone cooks mac and cheese, and I tell you, up until today, not even a single restaurant can cook mac and cheese like he did. Those are the memories that we share. Those are the things. I don't even want anyone to cook mac and cheese from even up until now. I don't want anyone else to cook it. I have to cook it myself because I was there in the kitchen when I was preparing it. It is something that I'm holding on to.
Yeah.
So I feel like I've held on more onto the good more than the bad.
Yeah.
So if someone has never experienced the love of a father, you can only have an idea of it.
Yeah.
And you can only choose to hold on to the idea. I would say do what you think works best for you. But rejection, I am very much well aware of the negative effects it can have on a person. But I cannot speak from that point of view because I never suffered rejection. My father died for whatever reason that he had.
Yeah.
And I understand that. I forgive him for leaving, even though I still needed him in my life. I forgive him and I set him free. May his soul rest in peace.
Yeah, so I picked up something from what you just said now. You don't have daddy issues.
No.
Like, you're not like other girls who suffered rejection from their fathers, through divorce and all that. So I know that in your life, once in your life you got married and you got divorced. I just want to ask if the relationship you had with your dad, the love that he gave you and everything, the whole experience of fatherhood in your life, did it have an impact on how you viewed your marriage and how your marriage had to come to an end?
That's a very good question. Wow. Firstly, as I've said, that the kind of love that my dad gave me, it sort of, to a certain extent, yes, it was sort of a measure of what I can accept as the bare minimum. But then I view my dad and my husband as two separate people.
Yeah.
The kind of love my father gave me was a daddy's love, and the kind of love my husband gave me was the sugar kind of love, you know.
Yeah.
By the time I got married, my dad was no longer in the picture. I would have wished that to a certain extent he could have been there to protect me from certain things that I experienced in marriage, because I felt like certain issues, they just needed man-to-man type of thing. But unfortunately he wasn't there. Do I blame my father's death on my marriage not working? Definitely not. However, there are certain similarities. Towards the end of my marriage, my husband did disappear on me. He went MIA on everyone for about 24 hours, and we even opened a missing person file. The first thing that came into my mind, knowing my husband's character, was to call the police, was to call everyone. Actually, I called the police, I think 3 hours after I could not get hold of him.
Yeah.
At that point in time, some people now, and even looking back, they might think that maybe I overreacted. Why did I go to that extent or that mile of calling everyone after such a short space of time? Even the police were laughing at me, saying, it's only been a few hours, you know, wait until after a certain number of hours before you can report a missing person file. But sitting here now and looking back, I feel that calling my father on that day and not being able to get hold of him, and the next thing that I heard hours later was that he had died, I feel like it left me with a certain level of anxiety. When I could not get hold of my husband, I was not willing for the next call that I hear to be he's no longer here.
Yeah.
That is why even during those hours when we were still waiting, or there was a big and back and forth trying to investigate, involving a whole lot of people to try and help us track my husband, when a relative of his called me and she said, what did you do to our child? To me at that point in time, it was insinuating or putting forward a theory, even before we could even receive anything, that should anything have happened to him, I would be to be blamed.
Yeah.
So for me, I feel like that whole experience did take me back to the day that my father died. I was the last person to have seen my husband before he disappeared. I didn't want that responsibility on me again.
Yeah. The fear.
The fear. That is why days later I walked away from that marriage while he was still alive. The love was very much still there, but I needed to save myself more than anything. I don't know if his life was in danger or not, but in case it was, if something was ever going to happen to him, I needed it to happen without me being there.
Yeah.
I could not take being the last person to see someone.
So you were afraid of having to face the very same thing that you faced with your dad, and you put an end to the relationship. I think you were still like the fear, Jay. You don't completely heal.
How do
I want
you,
us to get there.
Yeah.
I feel like you don't completely heal.
How do you heal from suicide?
And whatever will happen in your life, you just choose to. But then it's there. You choose how you want to control the feeling that you have.
Subconsciously.
Yeah.
It's always there.
Okay, yeah. So what I'm picking up here from what you just said is that you don't completely heal from the loss of somebody, regardless of how they had to pass. and in one way or the other you're still affected in your life, but then you just control how, to what extent can that go, you know. And I learned a lot from you. I learned that for a parent to be there in the beginning, I think what matters is how it started, not how it's gonna end.
Definitely.
Because you live up to the memory, and it helped you. It also helped you carrying the memory, you carrying the love with you, and it keeps you going. Yeah. So for fathers at home who are not living with their kids, who are far away, we don't know what could be the reason. What can we say to them? Because what I picked up is that it's so important for a father to be there into their children's life. So what can you say to a father sitting at home watching this, and their kids are about to experience fatherlessness? What can you tell them?
I think sadly, this is very, 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 very sad, because statistics show that there's a 67% of children in South Africa that grow up without fathers in their household. Whatever reason, be it due to them being abandoned, due to them being restricted access, due to the father not being alive, your presence in your child's life matters, irrespective of the relationship. Your child needs you. I don't care how strong the woman you made the child with is. I don't care what the situation behind the relationship was with the mother. I don't care. Please remove whatever emotions, remove whatever situation. Put the child first. What about the child? It affects how they view themselves. If they did not receive love from home, how do you expect them to go out and show other people love? If you did not give them love, how do you expect them to receive it properly from another man? Be there for your child, more especially a girl child, so that she does not go out and seek love from another man. That is the saddest thing on earth. Even with the statistics, the worst part is that South Africa has the highest rate of absent fathers in the world, not just South Africa, in the world. I think if you're a father and you're not in your child's life, you should be ashamed. You are part of the problem. Whatever problems are currently happening with children out there, you are part of the problem, and I'll urge you to just do your part.
We have come to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please do subscribe if you haven't, and don't forget to visit Sophia's YouTube channel, and also subscribe. I'm gonna leave up a link in the description box below, so do follow her on social media platforms.
So Sophia Vutomi Chabalala, SOPHIA, that's Sophia Vutomi Chabalala, and I look forward to having some traffic from you.
Bye.